Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I died in the winter of 1999 on a night when snow was falling thick and heavy outside. My body had long been drained, worn out from endless labor and years of silent torment. In the end, what destroyed me wasn't some great disaster, just an ordinary cold. The moment before I closed my eyes, I was lying on the cold, narrow bed in the storage room. Outside the door, I could hear the laughter of my husband, Michael Carter, and his lover, Emily White. "Michael, do you think Lily will ever get better?" Emily's voice was soft and delicate as always, innocent and fragile, like a white lotus that couldn't bear a touch. "Don't bother with her," Michael said coldly. "She's nothing but bad luck. The sooner she dies, the better." There wasn't a shred of affection in his voice, only irritation and disgust. "If my mom hadn't had a stroke last year and needed someone to take care of her, I'd have divorced her already. Good thing you were clever enough to give me that idea. Make her choose between divorcing me and caring for my mom. A stubborn fool like her would never walk away. Now she's our freem." "Michael, you're amazing," Emily said in a sweet, flirtatious tone. "Once she dies, you'll be able to marry me. I'll take good care of your mom too." "Marry you? My darling Emily? I'd never let you do any hard work. Once she's gone, we'll just hire a maid." So this was it. All my loyalty, all the effort I'd poured into serving that family, caring for his paralyzed mother until my body gave out, had been nothing but a part of their carefully laid plan. For him, I had given up my chance to return to the city. I had abandoned my job and followed him to this remote military housing compound. I washed and cooked, cared for his parents, helped raise his siblings, and turned myself into a joke. I hated them. The hatred surged through me like an icy tide swallowing me whole. If there were another life, Michael Carter, Helen Carter, Emily White, every debt you owe me I'll take back one by one with interest. When consciousness returned, I was being shaken hard. "Lily, are you dead asleep? The sun's already up and you're still lying there instead of making breakfast. You think the Carter family brought you here to worship you?" That sharp, grating voice stabbed straight into my ears like a steel needle. I opened my eyes suddenly. The first thing I saw was the wedding photo hanging on the wall. Me smiling shyly, full of happiness, and beside me Michael Carter, looking proud and handsome in his military uniform. Wait, wasn't this the small bedroom we lived in just after we got married? I turned my head and saw Helen Carter, my mother-in-law, standing there with her hands on her hips, glaring at me fiercely. She looked strong and full of energy, wearing a floral polyester blouse. Nothing at all like someone who had ever suffered a stroke. I sat up abruptly, my gaze falling on the calendar on the table. June 12, 1990. I had been reborn. I'd come back 9 years earlier before every tragedy began. Helen hadn't had her stroke yet. Michael and Emily's affair was still hidden in the dark, and I hadn't yet given up everything for this family. My heart pounded wildly, trembling with disbelief and excitement. In my previous life, everything had started this very year, the year I became the Carter family's unpaid servant. Michael's younger sister, Laura Carter, was preparing for her college entrance exams, and Helen had insisted that no one could disturb her studies. So all the housework was dumped onto me, and that foolish version of me, brainwashed by the idea of being the perfect wife and daughter-in-law, had accepted it all without complaint. The cruelest irony was that Laura didn't even manage to get into a vocational school in the end. And for her second attempt, it was me who had to humble myself and go back to my parents' house to borrow that money. "What are you staring at? Go make breakfast." Helen Carter's voice shot up another octave when I didn't move fast enough. I swallowed the storm rising inside me, pushed the blanket aside, and silently got out of bed. Not this time. I wouldn't let them trample me again. Breakfast was corn porridge with some pickled vegetables I had brought from my parents' house. At the table, Helen was, as always, looking for something to criticize. "Lily, what's this? Are you that stingy when it comes to spending money on our family? My son works so hard in the army, and this is what he gets to eat when he comes home." Laura Carter, Michael's younger sister, quickly jumped in to help. "Yeah, sis-in-law. My classmates' families eat meat every day." I lowered my head, slowly stirring the corn porridge with my chopsticks. Unlike in my previous life, I didn't bow my head and apologize timidly. Michael Carter frowned. He was a company commander used to being respected everywhere he went. Even at home he expected to be treated like a lord. He slapped his chopsticks on the table with a sharp crack. Lily, what's wrong with you? How can you talk to Mom like that? Are you mute now? I lifted my head and met Helen's sharp, judgmental gaze calmly. We're out of money, I said evenly. The allowance you gave me last month, Mom said she needed it to buy study materials for Laura, so she took it. Helen's face stiffened. She glared at me viciously. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I ever take your money? Mom, you must have forgotten, I said flatly. Last Wednesday you took $50 from the pocket of my blue jacket hanging on the wall. You said Laura is the future college student of this family, and her future can't be delayed. My tone was calm, but I made sure to state the exact time, place, and amount. In my past life I wouldn't have dared mention this. When Helen took the money, I had quietly covered the household expenses with my own savings. And when Michael asked at the end of the month, I even lied for her, saying I just spent too freely. Helen's face flushed red, then turned pale. She pointed a trembling finger at me and snapped, You jinx! Are you questioning me now? I spend my son's money if I please. What right do you, an outsider, have to say anything? I'm not an outsider, I replied steadily. I'm Michael Carter's legal wife. The money in this house is our marital property. His and mine. Each word was clear and deliberate. The table fell silent. Michael stared at me in surprise. It was probably the first time he'd ever seen me talk back so sharply. Helen, on the other hand, was shaking with fury. Unbelievable. Michael, look at her. Look at the kind of wife you've married. She dares talk back to me now. Soon she'll be running this house over my head. She began slapping her thighs and wailing, her favorite weapon. In my previous life, the moment she cried like that, Michael would scold me harshly without asking a single question, forcing me to apologize. This time I just looked at her coldly, curious to see what he would do. Michael's expression darkened. The entire neighborhood was full of his military colleagues and their families. He cared deeply about his reputation. If word got out that his household was in chaos, it would shame him. Enough! He barked, not at me but at his mother. It's too early in the morning for this nonsense. You want the neighbors to laugh at us. Then he turned toward me. His tone softened slightly, though it still carried the weight of command. Lily, you two. Mom's getting old. Can't you just say something nice and let it go? Inside I sneered. Of course, the same as before. Blame both sides equally. Smooth things over without ever facing the truth. But it didn't matter. I had achieved what I wanted today. I wanted them to know that I was no longer the weak, obedient woman they could mold at will. I lowered my head and said softly, I understand. On the surface, the tension seemed to fade. But I knew this was only the beginning. That afternoon, I told them I was going back to my parents' house. In truth, I went secretly to the Shinanoa bookstore in the city. In my previous life, my greatest regret was never continuing my education. I had graduated high school with excellent grades. If I hadn't rushed into marrying Michael Carter, I might have gone to college. Now that I had been given another life, I would never throw away that chance again. I remembered it clearly. In 1990, the regional nursing school was holding an open recruitment. If I got in, I'd earn official government status and a guaranteed job after graduation. It was the best way for me to break free from the Carter family and win back a life of my own. The exam would be held in 3 months. Time was tight. I couldn't waste a second. I used the last bit of money I'd secretly saved to buy a complete set of high school review materials. To keep anyone from discovering them, I wrapped the books in an old piece of cloth, hid them at the bottom of a basket, and covered them with wild greens. On my way home, I ran into Mr. Wong, an old veteran who worked as the gatekeeper of our compound. He was known for being fair, kind, and always ready to help. Lily, you're back. Mr. Wong greeted me with a warm smile. Hello, Mr. Wong, I replied politely. He lowered his voice. You don't look too well. Trouble at home again? I've heard some things. Your mother-in-law's got a sharp tongue, and that husband of yours doesn't know how to treat a wife properly. His words made my chest tighten with warmth. In my previous life, when I was at my lowest, Mr. Wong had secretly slipped me 2 steamed buns so I wouldn't go hungry. My eyes burned, and I forced a smile that was uglier than crying. It's fine, Mr. Wong, I'm used to it. Silly girl, he said kindly. Don't bottle things up. If Michael ever dares to bully you, you tell me. I'll go speak to his superior myself. His kindness felt like the first trace of warmth I'd found in that frozen hell. Deep inside, I swore to myself that one day, if I ever had the chance, I would repay him. When I got home, Helen Carter was in the yard with Mrs. Lee from next door, chatting while they picked vegetables. The moment she saw me, Helen said with a mocking tone, "Well, you sure go back to your parents' house often. Anyone who didn't know better would think our Carter family's been mistreating you." Mrs. Lee gave an awkward smile and nodded politely at me. I ignored Helen completely, went straight inside, and pulled the books from the basket, hiding them in the most concealed spot under the bed frame. From that day on, my life split into two sides. By day, I was still the quiet, obedient daughter-in-law, shopping for groceries, cooking, doing laundry, cleaning the house. I did everything perfectly, leaving Helen no excuse to find fault. Seeing me act as if nothing had changed, she gradually resumed her arrogant, bossy ways. But this time I only listened in silence, letting her words pass through one ear and out the other. I followed her orders just enough, never more than necessary. If she told me to massage her legs, I'd squeeze twice and say my hands were sore. If she wanted me to get up in the middle of the night to pour her water, I'd pretend to be asleep and not hear a thing. After several failed attempts, Helen was furious but couldn't find any real fault to accuse me of. All she could do was complain to Michael that I'd grown lazy and wasn't as considerate as before. And Michael, he was the perfect example of a man who only cared about immediate comfort. As long as the household ran smoothly and his reputation wasn't affected, he couldn't be bothered with the petty quarrels between mother and daughter-in-law. At night, when everyone was asleep, that time belonged to me. I jammed a towel into the door crack to stop any light from escaping, then read under the weak glow of an old desk lamp, greedily absorbing every bit of knowledge from the books. I had dropped high school studies for years, so picking them up again was very hard. On countless late nights, when my eyelids fought to stay open, I splashed cold water on my face or pricked my fingertip with a needle so the pain would keep me awake. I knew this was my only chance. I could not lose. Once I returned to my parents' home, I quietly told my brother Sam about my plan. Sam was 18, had failed to get into college and stayed home. He was blunt and the one who cared for me most. In my last life, he had tried to stand up for me. He went to argue with Michael and was publicly humiliated, told that an unemployed youth had no right to interfere in a commander's family affairs. That incident became a lifelong wound. Later, he went south to work and seldom returned. When I explained my plan and my situation in the Carter household, Sam's eyes turned red with anger. "How dare they treat you like this? Michael's a scoundrel. I'll go settle it with him." "Don't," I grabbed him back. "Now isn't the time, Sam. You gave me a second life. I won't waste it on a moment of righteous fury. I want to sever them completely and make them pay for what they did." I pressed the rest of the money for the books into his hand and asked a favor. Every weekend, use visiting me as an excuse to bring the answer sheets for my practice tests to that little grove by the river where we used to go. I would leave completed papers there, and he would take them away. I couldn't risk leaving the papers at home. If they were found, all my work would be for nothing. Sam nodded hard, his eyes full of resolve. "I'll help you, sister. No one will bully you again." With my brother's help, my study plan went much more smoothly. 2 months flew by and my efforts paid off. My mock exam scores improved each time. I felt filled with strength, and the bright future seemed almost within reach. At the same time, my plan to ruin Michael and Emily needed to move forward. In my last life, I only stumbled onto their affair at the end of the year, but this time I already knew they'd been involved for a long time. Emily White was the music teacher at the compound school. Pretty, soft-spoken, and skilled at attracting men. Her husband was also an officer who trained away from home for long stretches, which created opportunities for her and Michael to meet. Michael had Wednesday afternoons off. He claimed meetings in the city but in fact met Emily. They usually chose a discreet guest house downtown. I needed evidence. In 1990, issues of a soldier's conduct were a grave matter. If proven, Michael's military career would be finished. But I couldn't catch them in the act myself. If I did, I'd be dragged into a dirty spectacle and labeled a crazed, pitiable wife. I wanted them ruined while I stepped away cleanly. I needed a witness, someone credible, respected, and with a mouth big enough to make sure everyone heard what needed to be heard. Immediately, one person came to mind. Mrs. Sun, the political commissar's wife who lived in our compound. Mrs. Sun was warm-hearted, but also a notorious gossip. Whenever the slightest thing happened in the compound, the entire neighborhood knew within half a day. Most importantly, she couldn't stand improper relationships between men and women. That kind of thing disgusted her the most. So, I started getting close to her subtly little by little. She loved hearing gossip, so I began dropping harmless tidbits about trivial neighborhood matters. She enjoyed being praised for her son's achievements, so I often mentioned how polite and talented he was. Always keeping his name on my lips. Over time we grew familiar. She began to see me as an honest, gentle daughter-in-law, a poor woman suffering quietly in her marriage. When I felt the time was right, I made my move. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Sure enough, Michael Carter once again claimed he had to go into the city for a meeting. I watched as he put on his crisp military uniform, hair slicked back until it shone, and I couldn't help but laugh coldly inside. After he left, I waited a while, timed everything carefully, then carried a bowl of freshly made mung bean soup and headed straight to Mrs. Sun's house. "Mrs. Sun, are you home?" I called from the doorway. "It's so hot today. I made some mung bean soup and brought you a little to cool off." "Oh, Lily, come in. Come in. You're too kind, child," she said warmly, ushering me inside. We chatted casually for a few minutes before I sighed as if unintentionally. "What's wrong, Lily? Did they upset you again?" she asked immediately, her tone full of concern. I shook my head and forced a small bitter smile. "No, it's not that. I'm just worried about Michael." "Worried about him? He's a grown man. What's there to worry about? He keeps saying he's going to meetings in the city. Comes home very late. When I ask what kind of meetings, he gets annoyed and says I wouldn't understand." I lowered my head, letting my voice tremble just a little with unease and uncertainty. "He went again today. I can't shake this uneasy feeling." That was all it took for Mrs. Sun's gossip radar to activate. Going to the city every week for meetings. That's strange. My husband hasn't mentioned any important meetings lately. I made sure to look a little lost and embarrassed. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. Then, as if by accident, I added, "Oh, last time I thought I saw Michael talking to a woman at the gate. I was too far away to see clearly. I just assumed it was work-related." "A woman?" Mrs. Sun's eyes lit up immediately. I dropped my gaze, fidgeting with my fingers. She looked young, wearing a white dress. She kind of looked like, well, maybe like that music teacher at the school. Miss Chan, Emily. Emily's husband was stationed out of town for long stretches, and she always carried herself like some fragile flower. People in the compound had been whispering for a while, but no one had any proof. What I just said was like pouring oil onto a smoldering fire. "Oh no, Mrs. Sun, please don't get the wrong idea," I said quickly, pretending to be flustered. "I'm sure I just mistook someone else for her." "Silly girl." Mrs. Sun slapped her thigh. "We can't just ignore something like this. Come on, I'll go with you. If there's nothing going on, we'll all be at ease. But if there is, you can't let yourself be fooled." I pretended to resist, shaking my head. But after a few half-hearted refusals, she insisted, grabbing my arm and pulling me along. As we stepped outside, I mentioned casually, "You know, last time I went shopping, I think I saw Michael's car parked near the Red Star guest house downtown." Mrs. Sun didn't hesitate for even a second. They dragged me straight onto the bus that went to the Red Star guest house. The Red Star was out of the way, known for taking guests with special needs. When we arrived, sure enough, Michael Carter's bicycle was parked at the guest house door. Mrs. Sun's face went stone cold in an instant. "Michael Carter, how dare he do something like this?" she hissed, ready to act. She was the sort who rolled up her sleeves and charged in, but I grabbed her arm. "Don't. Let's not storm in," I whispered, tears already spilling down my face, half from the performance, half real, for the idiot I had been in my last life. Mrs. Sun watched me with even more fury, but a bit of reason returned to her. "You're right. We can't let that dog off the hook. All right, we won't go in. We'll just wait here and see what tricks they try." We hid in a secluded corner opposite the guest house and waited. After more than an hour, Michael and Emily came out entwined. Emily's face flushed, and she clung to Michael as if she couldn't bear to let go. Their manner was intimate, exactly like lovers in the heat of romance. Mrs. Sun trembled with rage, clamped a hand over her mouth to stop herself from swearing, and I stood behind her watching the dazzling scene, my nails digging into my palm. Good witness secured. Now I just needed the fuse to blow everything up. Back at the compound, Mrs. Sun grumbled and cursed all the way home, indignant on my behalf while I quietly wiped my tears and played the helpless, pitiable victim. Lily, what are you going to do? You can't just let this slide, Mrs. Sun demanded. I shook my head, choking back my voice. I don't know. Please don't tell anyone yet. I want to give him one more chance. Family shame shouldn't be aired. If this gets out, we'll both be finished. I framed it as a tactical retreat. I knew Mrs. Sun's nature well. Keeping such a big secret would eat at her, and the more I begged her to stay quiet, the more she'd pity me and hate Michael, which would give her even more incentive to spread the story later. As I suspected, Mrs. Sun looked at me with a mix of exasperation and sympathy. You foolish child. After all this you still think of him? She snapped, but she couldn't keep quiet for long. Sure enough, the next day, the whole compound was buzzing with gossip about the commander and the music teacher. Versions varied wildly, but every rumor pointed at Michael Carter and Emily White. Michael quickly felt the change in people's eyes. He was a man who treasured his reputation, and the whispering made him miserable. He came home and accused me. Was I the one spreading rumors? I watched his guilty, uncomfortable face with nothing but cold mockery and continued to cry, saying nothing. The more I stayed silent and wept, the more convinced he became that I had been grievously wronged. Enough! Enough! Stop crying! He snapped impatiently, waved his hand, and slammed the door as he left. He didn't go to see Emily. He was scared. He thought if he kept his head down for a while, the uproar would fade. He was naive. My plan had only just begun. While I watched Michael flounder from the sidelines, I stepped up the final push on my studies. There was only 1 week left until the exam. It was at that moment that the nightmare from my last life replayed early. That afternoon, Helen erupted in a rage because Laura's mock exam scores were poor, and she spent the entire afternoon shouting and cursing. I pretended to be sick and hid in my room to study when suddenly there was a loud bang from outside followed by Laura's scream. My heart dropped. In my last life, it was that single furious outburst from Helen that ruptured a blood vessel and caused her sudden stroke. I ran out and saw Helen collapsed on the ground, her mouth and eyes crooked, her body convulsing. Laura was beside herself, clutching and crying. I forced myself to stay calm. In the last life, I was the first to find her. I called an ambulance, paid the medical fees up front, and then began a year of hellish caregiving. In this life, I swore I wouldn't let that filthy burden be poured onto me again. I told Laura to run find Mr. Wong and have him use the gatehouse phone to call an ambulance and to go fetch Dr. Lee from the unit clinic. Go, I said. My calm gave Laura focal point. She scrambled out like a mad thing. I looked down at Helen on the ground with a gaze that held no warmth at all. This is your retribution. Soon Mr. Wong and Dr. Lee arrived and neighbors gathered in the yard whispering. I stood at the edge of the crowd like a stunned onlooker. The ambulance came and went with its siren. By the time Michael rushed back from the base, Helen had already been taken into surgery. He saw me and immediately unleashed a torrent of abuse. Where were you with Mom in this state? Where were you? How have you been taking care of the family? He needed someone to vent at and blame, and I was the easiest target. Before I could answer, Mr. Lee beside us couldn't stand it. Michael, that's unreasonable. Your mother collapsed suddenly. How is that Lily's fault? If Lily hadn't acted decisively and told your sister to call for help, your mother might be worse off. Mr. Wong chimed in. Yes, Commander. Lily was frightened too, but she still told Laura to call an ambulance. She did the right thing. Michael was left speechless, his face dark as iron. He glared at me with that hateful look I knew so well, already scheming how to shove the mess of caring for a paralyzed mother onto me. Just like last time, after 5 hours of resuscitation, Helen's life was saved. But the outcome was identical to before. Hemiplegia, unable to speak, completely bedridden. That meant she would require round-the-clock one-on-one care. Michael and his sister hovered at the bedside watching Helen's involuntary soiling and constant groans, their faces full of undisguised disgust and irritation. The next day Michael sought me out. His expression was severe, like a judge looking down on me. "Lily, we need to talk," he said, dragging me to an empty corner of the hospital and getting straight to the point. "You've seen our mother's condition. Laura needs to keep studying and I'm busy with work. The family needs someone to devote themselves entirely to caring for her." I looked at him silently. Then his tone shifted. He softened a little and said, "I know these past few months have been hard on you." He started playing the sympathy card. "I was wrong before. I lost my temper and ignored your feelings. I'll change from now on. Just take good care of my mother. Once she gets a bit better, I promise I'll make it up to you." It was a laughably empty promise and a classic ploy to placate me. When he saw I remained unmoved, his patience ran out and his true face showed. "Lily, I'll be honest with you," he said, taking a sheet of paper from his pocket and unfolding it in front of me. "This is the divorce papers. I've already signed it." I looked at the paper and my heart did not stir at all. "Now you have two choices," he said coldly. "First, sign the papers and we divorce. But think it through. As a divorced woman, you'll have no job. How will you live? Can your parents support you for the rest of your life?" He paused, then curled his lips into a triumphal sneer. "Second, don't divorce and stay to take care of my mother. If you look after her well, I'll recognize you as my wife. One day, when I'm promoted to regimental or divisional commander, you'll be the spouse of an officer. You'll have a comfortable life. So you choose divorce or be my mother's lifetime unpaid caregiver." Finally I spoke. My voice was calm and flat like a still pool. He thought he'd scared me into submission and said smugly, "You can take it that way, Lily. I advise you to think carefully. If you go against me, you won't end well." I looked at his self-righteous face and suddenly laughed, a loud, derisive laugh that even brought tears. Michael was baffled and enraged. "What are you laughing at? Are you crazy?" he yelled. I wiped the tears from my eyes, shook my head and said nothing more. He sneered. "You are pathetic." After that, I didn't look back. I turned and left. My entrance exam was the next day. I refused to let anyone or anything block my path to a new life. I did not go to the hospital or return to that nauseating house. I went to see Sam. He was already waiting for me at the station as we had agreed. "Sister, everything's ready. Let's go," he said. We boarded the first bus into the city. At the exam, I held my pen and looked at the familiar test paper with a peace I'd never known before. I had rehearsed these questions countless times over the past 3 months. My pen moved as if guided. After finishing the last subject and stepping out of the exam hall, I tilted my face to the clear blue sky and let out a long exhale. The old life was finally over. Michael must have discovered I was missing by then. I could imagine him frantic, searching our home, going to my parents' house to make a scene, or asking our mutual friends where I might be. I didn't care. Once my acceptance notice arrived, everything would be settled. But I had underestimated Michael's shamelessness. When he couldn't find me, he turned his attention to my brother Sam. 3 days later, as Sam was at the compound well helping neighbors fetch water like usual, Michael intercepted him. It was early evening and the yard was bustling with people doing laundry and getting water. The well was the busiest spot. Michael, in his crisp uniform, looked down at my brother with arrogance and contempt. "Where's your sister? Make her come out," he barked. Sam choked on his words, caught off guard. Michael let out a cold, mocking laugh, pulled the divorce papers from his pocket, and waved them in front of Sam's face. "Go tell your sister this," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "She has 2 choices. Come back right now to take care of my mother or sign this and get out for good." He deliberately raised his voice so everyone nearby could hear. He wanted to use public pressure to force me into submission, to make sure everyone believed I, Lily Carter, was a heartless, unfilial woman who abandoned her paralyzed mother-in-law and ran away from home. The neighbors began whispering, pointing fingers, murmuring among themselves. Sam's face turned bright red with anger. His fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Michael looked satisfied with the reaction, stepped closer, and jabbed a finger hard into Sam's chest. I'll give you one last chance, he threatened, his tone low and menacing. Either she comes back or she divorces me. She needs to decide whether she wants to stay the commander's wife or end up a worthless nobody. Divorce or care for my paralyzed mother. That's her final choice. Just then, a strong elderly voice cut through the crowd. Commander Carter, what a mighty officer you are. The voice boomed sarcastically. It was Mr. Wong, the gatekeeper veteran, walking slowly toward them with his hands clasped behind his back. Behind him stood Mrs. Sun, her face stern and cold. Seeing Mr. Wong, Michael's arrogance faltered slightly, but he still tried to keep his composure. Mr. Wong, this is a family matter. Please stay out of it. Mr. Wong gave a sharp snort and stepped up to him, his cloudy eyes suddenly gleaming with sharp clarity. Funny, he said. I heard you've been fooling around with another woman, and now you're trying to force your own wife to serve your paralyzed mother, threatening her with divorce if she refuses. Michael's face went pale in an instant. Mrs. Sun took a step forward, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. That's right. I saw it myself at the Red Star guest house. Shameless as could be. The crowd exploded. Oh my God, really? I knew something was off with him lately. Poor Lily. That girl's always been so kind and proper. Michael's face turned red with fury and humiliation. He pointed at Mrs. Sun and shouted, You're slandering me. Slandering, she snapped, hands on her hips ready for a fight. You know exactly what you did. Lily kept quiet, but you think no one else saw. You pushed a good woman to her breaking point, and now you want to make her your family servant for life. You don't deserve her. Michael was struck speechless. Rage twisted his face and in desperation, he turned it all on Sam, as if lashing out at him could somehow restore his pride. He waved the divorce papers in the air, shouting, I don't care what any of you say. Where's Lily? She has to choose right now. Mr. Wong looked at him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly, pity flashing in his eyes. You're still dreaming, aren't you? He said quietly, but his voice carried clearly across the courtyard. Lily took her nursing school entrance exam 3 days ago, and this morning her acceptance letter arrived. I just had Sam bring it home. She's now a government student, a future doctor. You think she still wants to be your commander's wife? Look at that paper you're holding and ask yourself, does she even care anymore? Does she need you? The world seemed to explode in Michael's ears. His face twisted from fury to disbelief, then to complete emptiness. He stood frozen in place, clutching that so-called ultimatum, the divorce report he once believed could decide his fate. Now it was nothing but a worthless joke. The neighbors' laughter, their whispers and their scornful stares pierced him like 1,000 needles. The pride he'd always cherished, the face he guarded so fiercely, shattered completely. At that moment his pride was crushed, shattered and trampled underfoot. I wasn't there to witness it myself, but Sam described every detail so vividly that I could picture it all as if I had been standing right there, holding the bright red admission notice in my hands, the 5 bold characters declaring my acceptance printed across it. I felt my entire body lighten. Every breath was clear and free. Michael Carter, I thought coldly. This is only the beginning. In the days that followed, the entire military housing compound exploded with gossip. News of my acceptance into nursing school, and my decision to file for divorce spread like wildfire through every corner. At the same time, the scandal of Michael's affair with Emily White and his attempt to force me to care for his paralyzed mother became public knowledge. With Mrs. Sun's help, the story was embellished until everyone knew every sordid detail. Public opinion swung entirely in my favor. People praised me for being strong, ambitious and independent, while they spat Michael's name like poison, calling him a heartless man who abandoned his faithful wife. Emily, on the other hand, became a pariah. Whenever she walked down the street, people whispered and even spat at her back. She soon requested an extended leave from her school and disappeared from the compound altogether. Meanwhile, the Army's disciplinary committee received an anonymous letter reporting Michael's moral misconduct. Of course, that letter was mine. I had written out every detail, the times, the places, the witnesses, and included Mrs. Sun's name as supporting testimony. The Army had zero tolerance for such scandals. Within days, Michael was suspended pending investigation. He panicked. Desperate, he came to my parents' home to find me. The arrogant, self-righteous commander I once knew was gone. In his place stood a pathetic man wearing an expression of regret he didn't deserve. "Lily, I was wrong," he said, his voice trembling. "I really was. Please forgive me just this once. For the sake of the years we spent together, tell them that letter was fake, that someone framed me." He stood outside my parents' gate, begging, his tone thick with false sincerity. I looked at him through the bars, my face cold and unmoving. "Michael," I said quietly, "there's no bond left between us. Lily, you can't be so cruel. Destroying me won't do you any good." His mask slipped and his voice turned sharp again. "Don't forget, you're about to start school. You wouldn't want your personal record to get stained, would you?" I smiled slow and steady. "You don't need to worry about my record," I said. "But maybe you should start worrying about your own." Then I turned and walked back inside without another word. The investigation results came soon after. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses, statements, and proof, and there was nothing he could say in his defense. Michael was given a serious disciplinary warning by the Army and was forcibly removed from his post as company commander. He was reassigned to a remote border outpost. His path to promotion was permanently cut off. As for me, the divorce went through smoothly. Since Michael was officially ruled at fault, the mediation committee granted me more than half of our shared savings, and the house we lived in was awarded entirely to me. I sold the house, exchanged it for cash, and walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau with the divorce certificate in my hand. The sun was shining beautifully that day. Not far away, I saw Michael standing there, hollow, lifeless, and utterly defeated. In just a few days, he looked 10 years older, all his arrogance and pride stripped away. Beside him stood Emily White, who had been forced to resign from her school position. The sweetness between them was long gone, replaced by confusion, bitterness, and mutual blame. Waiting for them both at home was Helen Carter, bedridden, paralyzed, and still needing someone to feed and clean her. The days ahead for them would be the hell I had endured in my last life. As for me, I held my future in my own hands. A bright, open path stretched out before me, and I never looked back. Years later, I graduated from nursing school with top honors and was assigned to the Central Military Hospital, the best posting in the district. I became a surgeon. I worked hard, honed my skills, and soon established myself at the hospital. Sam used the money I gave him to start a small business. He began with a simple street stall, worked his way up step by step, and eventually became a well-known businessman in our city. I often visited Mr. Wong and Mrs. Sun to thank them for their kindness and support in my darkest days. My life was peaceful and fulfilling. Once during a consultation visit to a local military hospital, I overheard someone mention Michael Carter. They said he had finally quit the Army. He couldn't endure the hardship of life at the remote outpost. After being discharged, he had no real skills, so he survived doing odd jobs. As for Emily White, after 2 years of caring for the bedridden Helen Carter, she eventually couldn't stand the burden anymore and ran off with a businessman who was heading south. Michael was left alone, forced to juggle low-paying work while caring for his paralyzed mother and his useless younger sister. His life was miserable. Someone told me that once he saw me on the street. I was driving my own car, dressed in a white coat, confident and radiant. He stood frozen for a long, long time, staring silently before finally lowering his head and walking away, pushing his cart like a deflated balloon. When I heard that, I felt nothing. No pity, no triumph, just calm detachment. That was a story from another lifetime, one that no longer had anything to do with me. At the hospital, I later met my second husband. He was also a doctor, gentle, intelligent, and respectful. He cherished me. Together, we had a beautiful daughter. One weekend, I took my daughter for a walk on the lawn of our housing complex. The sun was warm and golden on our skin. She pointed curiously toward the old washing platform in the distance and asked, "Mom, what's that place for?" I looked at that familiar spot and smiled. Once it had been the beginning of my nightmares, but now it was nothing more than a faint, insignificant shadow in my memory. I took my daughter's hand and said softly, "That place, that's where your mom said goodbye to her past and began her new life." And yes, this new life was truly beautifully good.